This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
Welcome to the Fatigue Fixer podcast. Ever wonder why it feels like the entire sisterhood is just so darn exhausted? We're diving deep into everything from those sneaky physical culprits, think iron levels, playing hide and seek, or a moody thyroid, to the mental weights of always being on and that sneaky urge to please everyone. And let's not forget society's oh-so-high bar that we're tirelessly trying to reach. I'm Dr. Sarah Vadebonkar, your guide on this energy-finding mission. As a naturopathic doctor with over a decade of experience, I've been piecing together the fatigue puzzle, asking why so many incredible women around me, including my patients, often feel like they're running on empty. So pull up a chair or perhaps pop in your headphones and head out for a walk. Together we'll uncover those hidden, surprising, and sometimes even downright unexpected reasons behind that lingering tiredness. Ready to recharge those batteries? All right, deep breath. Let's jump into today's insightful episode. Let's talk about sex, baby. Actually, let's talk about how many of us aren't really interested in having sex. Upwards of 40% of women report low sexual desire at some point in their lives, and based on what I'm hearing in my office, it's a sad state of affairs in many of our bedrooms. I know many women would rather sleep than have sex, or maybe you'd even go as far as one of my patients who said she'd rather have her teeth cleaned than have sex. Today is the one where you're driving with the brakes on, and we're going to explore why so many women's libido is MIA and what we can do to get that sexual energy flowing again. Because the good news is that your sex drive, it's still there inside of you. It's just buried and hidden under a mountain of to-do lists, resentment, and unrealistic sexpectations. See what I did there? Trying to feel that loving feeling while simultaneously juggling 3,842 things in your mind, it's not going to work. So let's dive into 3 things that are slamming the brake on your sex drive. First up, we have stress. Desire begins between your ears, not between your legs. In fact, our brains are the ultimate pleasure center and our largest sex organ. So think about what's going on in your brain right now. Maybe you're trying to remember that you need to pick up some chicken for dinner tonight, worrying about that upcoming work deadline or how much your mortgage renewal is going to cost. Are the kids doing okay in school? Most of us are juggling very high levels of stress and multiple responsibilities. We have a million tabs open at all times in our mind, which is exhausting, and it can completely obscure our ability to feel pleasure. All of those things we're expected to manage have us living completely in our heads, and that's led women to disconnect from our bodies. And there's a fascinating study that proved just that. It was looking at women's arousal and pleasure. So they inserted a tiny probe into the woman's vagina, and then they had them watch female-friendly porn, and they were able to measure their physical arousal. Almost all of the women got physically aroused. But when the researchers asked them if they were turned on, they said no. Their brain wasn't picking up what their vagina was putting down. They were physically turned on, but their brain was probably too busy, their mind somewhere else, that they didn't even notice. And maybe this is true for you too. Your vagina's like, hey girl, trying to get your attention, but you're staring down your mounting list of emails and you don't even notice. Or maybe when your partner gives you that look, you're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses and avoidant techniques. Right? I'm too tired, or the classic, I have a headache. Maybe you're going to bed at different times so that you can avoid those awkward encounters when you don't really want to have sex. And the saddest one of all to me is doing it to get it over with. Now, before you start thinking that there's something wrong with you, there isn't. Your body's actually doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to protect you. Anyone who's had a baby knows Babies equal stress. There's the 9 months of pregnancy to make it through, and then there's the constant feeding, changing, getting the baby to sleep cycle. And what causes babies? Sex. So if your brain is looking around and feeling like you're running around like your hair is on fire, it's going to try to protect you from adding more stress to your life. So it shuts down your desire. No desire equals no sex equals no babies equals no added stress. Ta-da! Aren't our bodies incredible? So if you want your brain to hear what your vagina is saying, we need to tone down the incessant stress bomb that most of us live in. Because a relaxed brain gives you happier hormones and increased sexual desire. Relaxing our brain will require that we let go of some of the things that we feel we have to do and drop some of the balls that bounce. This is why a big part of what I teach the women in my effortless energy community is all about doing less. It's the thing that most of us find most difficult to do is to do less. Because we are all trained and conditioned to perform and to do, and most of us feel like if I stop doing all the things, everything will start to fall apart. So we feel this immense pressure to continue to juggle all the balls and not let any of the balls fall to the ground, because if we do, we feel like we've let ourselves down and we've let down the people around us. But letting go of that stress is one of the keys to allowing your sexual desire to be heard again. So the number one thing or the number one step to stop driving with the brakes on is to work on lessening your stress load. I know that that is easier said than done, but if good sex is on the other side of it, let's make it happen. Let's have a look at all the things we're doing. Let's have a look at those things that when they show up in your calendar, you're like, oh God, no, I don't want to do that. What are the things that are really adding to your stress load, and where can you start to really cut or reduce or delegate some of those things away? Let's get to the number 2 reason that you're driving with the brakes on, and that is rom-com sex. So first, I need to dispel a myth, which is that sexual desire is a drive, and I am still guilty of calling it a sex drive. But when something is an actual drive, the less you do it, the more you want it. So think of hunger and thirst. The less you eat, the hungrier you become. And for most women, sex is not like that. The less we have it, the less we want it. So what do rom-coms have to do with this? Well, they perpetuate these completely unrealistic expectations about how and when we should desire sex. I should want to rip my partner's clothes off the second they get home and walk through the door and have sex right there on the floor. And if we don't feel like that, we assume that something is wrong with us, that we're the problem. The problem isn't us. It's the version of desire that we've grown up seeing on TV and movies, where panties are dropping so quickly. But that's not how female desire works. I'm going to share something that completely changed the way that I think about sexual desire. The stuff you're seeing in the movies are all examples of spontaneous desire. So I was just standing in the kitchen cutting a zucchini, and all of a sudden I got this strong and irresistible urge to have sex now. I would probably love making dinner a lot more if that's how it went. But spontaneous desire isn't that common among women, especially if you're in a long-term monogamous relationship. We all probably felt that way in the early days of our relationship, where just the thought of our partner often was enough to get us raring to go. Now we're 10 plus years into it. We've had a couple kids. We've got busy work and school and home schedules, bodies that look a little bit different than they did 10 years ago. And that spark might feel pretty extinguished. But that doesn't mean it's a lost cause, because we do have something called reactive desire. This is where you're not really in the mood, but you're open to it. And once things get going, then we start to desire sex, right? Once we start kissing or foreplay and realize how nice and good it feels, we're like, yes, I do want to have sex. It's a classic cart before the horse problem. We assume that we have to wait to be in the mood to have sex, but instead, we can start having sex to get in the mood. So, step number 2 to stop driving with the brakes on is to stop feeling like you're broken if you don't experience spontaneous desire and start tapping into the magic of reactive desire, because we need to have sex to want it. And the number 3 reason that you're driving with the brakes on is bad sex. So before we talk about the impact of bad sex, let me ask you, dear listener, how often do you feel pleasure? And I'm not just talking about, toe curling orgasms here, but just the good old-fashioned pleasure of things like sitting down with a new book and a cup of tea, eating your favorite food, losing track of time with your favorite hobby. Most of us are starved for pleasure. And if you're struggling to find pleasure in your life, it's hard to find it in the bedroom. Pleasure is all about getting your needs met. And if you're not experiencing pleasure, you're also probably not getting your needs met. And that's often because we either don't let ourselves have needs. How often do we use the word selfless to describe a good mother or wife? Apparently, we're just supposed to erase ourselves and all of our needs in the service of others if we want to be good. Or we're so busy doing all the things that we don't even know what we need. So what do you need? What do you desire? What brings you pleasure? We often expect other people to know how to pleasure us, and half the time we don't even know how to do it for ourselves. And then once we hit a certain age or stage of life, our body can make it harder for us to experience pleasure. When we're tired and overwhelmed all the time, pleasure it's not going to feel like a priority. And I know that resentment is killing our sex lives. That's why we're going to do a whole episode about overfunctioning and resentment with psychologist and relationship expert Dr. Tracy Douglas. So stay tuned for that episode. But in the meantime, be very mindful that what's happening in your relationship and the dynamic between you and your partner is obviously going to have a huge impact on your sexual desire. If you're taking antidepressants or maybe you're on the birth control pill, those can also have a dampening effect on your sexual desire. It doesn't mean we shouldn't take those meds, but we do need to do a better job of informing women about the possible side effects of these meds that are very often prescribed to us. And then once we hit perimenopause, the hormonal roller coaster can throw a real wrench into things. Women often assume that their low sexual desire must be due to some kind of hormonal imbalance. That's one of the most common things I hear from women in my office. Like, is there a hormone problem causing this? And while hormones definitely can play a part in the problem, especially if you're going through perimenopause and menopause, they're rarely the whole piece of the puzzle. So we know that hormones have a huge impact on both the brain and the vagina. But as we talked about before, your brain and your mind and your stress are also a huge part of our ability to have desire and experience pleasure. So I know it would be so much easier if you could just slap on some testosterone cream or take a hormone balancing supplement and be horny again, but that's probably not the case. That's not how these things work. But your hormones could be contributing to bad sex. And this is especially common when women are postpartum and when they're going through perimenopause and menopause. So hormone changes can affect the vaginal tissues, and that can cause things like dryness, discomfort or pain, less arousal, and make it harder to reach orgasm. And here's the thing. If it doesn't feel good when you do it, you don't want to do it. So bad sex is the enemy of more sex, because if the sex you're having isn't great, you're not going to want to do it. You're not going to want to have more of it. So if your sex life isn't great, it's time to work on that. Number 1, lube is your best friend. So if you're not using it, please start there. It makes everything feel better instantaneously. So use lube if you're not. And if you're going through perimenopause and menopause and your vagina is not happy about it, ask your doctor or your naturopathic doctor about treatments, because we have treatments. I'm a huge fan of vaginal estriol. This is something I recommend and prescribe to my patients all the time, which is just a form of estrogen cream that you apply to your vagina that is super safe and effective. And kind of think of it like an anti-aging cream for your vagina. It helps keep your vagina healthy and happy so that you can have pain-free and enjoyable sex. So step number 3 to stop driving with the brakes on is to make pleasure a priority in your day-to-day life. The more pleasure you allow yourself to feel, the more enjoyable sex becomes. And please don't settle for bad sex. Figure out how to make it fun and pleasurable again. I hope you're leaving today's conversation knowing and better understanding that your libido, it's not broken or dead. It's just buried under a mountain of expectations, resentments, unmet needs, not to mention the shame that so many of us carry for having sexual desires in the first place. All of these things are slamming the brakes on our sex drive. I know you're tired and probably overwhelmed by all the things on your plate. But the pleasure we can get from sex, whether it's solo or partnered, is the perfect antidote to our busy, stressful lives. And it's just what this doctor ordered to help you fix your fatigue. Thanks for spending your precious time with me today. Remember, it takes a village or a podcast community to really make a dent in this fatigue epidemic. If today's episode resonated with you, do me a favor. Share it with a friend or two, and if you have a second, drop us that shiny 5-star review. It means so much to me. Are you eager to solve your own personal energy puzzle? Hop on over to fatiguefixer.ca/quiz and check out my fatigue fingerprint quiz. Let's pinpoint what's standing between you and feeling your best. A big thank you to Jen Hudson and Drew Gardner over at Story Studio Network for bringing these conversations to life. And hey, just so you know, I've got your back. Your fatigue, it's super real, and it's definitely not just all in your mind. I see you and I believe you. Every 2 weeks, we'll keep these heart-to-hearts going, learning together and cheering each other on. Because between you and me, accepting perpetual exhaustion as the norm, that's not going to fly around here. See you back here in 2 weeks. Bye!